For this next set of slides, we're going to be talking about the different mechanisms that the body uses to maintain acid-base balance, or to maintain pH. The first thing that you need to be familiar with for this section is what a buffer is. So you should know that a buffer is something that's going to release hydrogen ions when the pH of the body or the area gets too high, and it's also going to accept hydrogen ions when the pH of the body or the area gets too low. So this is something that is able to release and accept hydrogen ions depending on what the situation is. And so these buffers can become very important in making sure that pH is maintained within a very narrow range. You should also know that the body has several different types of buffer systems, and these buffer systems tend to be lumped into two categories. We have one category called the intracellular buffer systems, and we have another category called the extracellular buffer systems. These intracellular buffer systems are the buffer systems that are located within the cells. So in exercise physiology, we tend to focus on intracellular buffer systems located within skeletal muscle cells or skeletal muscle fibers. And what you should know about these intracellular buffer systems is that they serve as the first line of defense against large changes in pH during exercise. And the reason that they serve as the first line of defense is because they're really located right next to the areas where hydrogen ions are being produced. So they're able to neutralize hydrogen ions really quickly because they're in close proximity to them as we're making them. However, it's important to note that the capacity of these systems is somewhat limited. That just means that it's very easy for us to overwhelm our intracellular buffer systems. Luckily, we also have extracellular buffer systems that are able to kind of pick up where the intracellular buffer systems leave off, or where they can't keep up anymore. These extracellular buffer systems are buffer systems that are located within the blood, and we call them our second line of defense against pH changes during exercise. On the next couple slides, I'm going to talk about a few examples of intracellular buffer systems and extracellular buffer systems. So here we have our intracellular buffer systems. You should know that intracellular buffer systems can be classified into two different categories. We either have what are called chemical buffers or hydrogen ion transporters. Both of these systems are responsible for essentially neutralizing hydrogen ions so that they aren't able to be a problem. Chemical buffers do this by actually reacting with the hydrogen ions, and the types of chemicals that are able to do this are things like bicarbonate, phosphates, and certain proteins. So they just react with or combine with hydrogen ions so that those hydrogen ions aren't floating around free in the cell causing problems. Our second type of intracellular buffer system is what we call a hydrogen ion transporter. So hydrogen ion transporters are proteins that are located in the sarcolemma, or the skeletal muscle membrane, and they're responsible for moving hydrogen ions out of the cell. So if we have a lot of hydrogen ions present on the inside of the cell, these hydrogen ion transporters will take them and just push them out into the extracellular environment. And that leads us to our extracellular buffer systems. So for extracellular buffer systems, you should know that we have three different types. We have the bicarbonate system, the hemoglobin system, and blood proteins. The most important buffer system in the body is the bicarbonate system. We'll talk about this more a little bit on the next slide, so I'm going to come back to that one. Our second extracellular buffer system is hemoglobin. So what's really interesting about hemoglobin is not only is hemoglobin able to transport oxygen through the blood, but deoxygenated hemoglobin in particular is able to transport hydrogen ions as well. So the blood is going to travel to the tissues, it's going to leave oxygen with the tissues, and then after it's dropped off the oxygen at the tissues, it's able to essentially pick up hydrogen and then carry that hydrogen up to the lungs where it can be expelled. So hemoglobin is a really great example of a multi-purpose molecule in the body. Our third extracellular buffer system are blood proteins. So blood proteins are just proteins that are located within the blood that are able to interact or combine with hydrogen ions. Blood proteins that are able to interact with hydrogen or essentially neutralize hydrogen ions tend to be present in the blood in relatively small quantities, so unfortunately their usefulness during heavy exercise is somewhat limited. They're just not there in high enough quantities to handle the amount of hydrogen ions that are produced during heavy exercise. And that leads us to our next question. What body systems help maintain acid-base balance? The first body system that you should be familiar with for its role in maintaining acid-base balance is the respiratory system or the ventilatory system. The reason the respiratory system is able to help maintain acid-base balance is because it works essentially hand in hand with the bicarbonate system that we discussed in a previous chapter. You'll see the bicarbonate system is shown here in about the middle of this slide. I don't want you to memorize the system. I'm just kind of putting it here for informational purposes. What I do want you to know is that when you breathe out carbon dioxide and water. That water contains a hydrogen ion. So every time you breathe out, you're removing carbon dioxide, which you all probably already knew, but you're also removing a hydrogen ion in the form of water. So what this means is that if you increase your ventilation, you're going to increase your removal of carbon dioxide and hydrogen ions in the form of water. And in increasing the removal of these, you're going to actually bring down the partial pressure of carbon dioxide, or the concentration of carbon dioxide in the blood, and you're going to bring down the concentration of hydrogen ions in the blood. And this is effectively going to increase your pH. So by increasing ventilation, you can decrease hydrogen ion concentration or increase pH of the blood. In contrast, if you decrease ventilation, or if you're not breathing out as much, you're going to decrease your removal of carbon dioxide and hydrogen ions in the form of water. This is going to allow partial pressure of carbon dioxide, or the concentration of carbon dioxide, to drift up in the blood. It's also going to allow the concentration of hydrogen ions to drift up in the blood, or effectively lower the pH of the blood. And that's really the gist of the respiratory system. So breathing helps to maintain hydrogen ion concentration. The second body system that you should be familiar with for its ability to help maintain acid-base balance is the urinary system. It's important to keep in mind that this is not a system that's going to have a very quick effect on acid-base balance, and because of that, it's not really a big player in maintaining acid-base balance during exercise. However, it's still worth being familiar with for the purposes of understanding general human physiology. So how does the urinary system help with acid-base balance? The role that this system plays in maintaining acid-base balance is through its ability to regulate bicarbonate levels in the body. So the way this works is that if your hydrogen ion concentrations in your body or your blood are consistently low, your kidneys are going to excrete more bicarbonate. By excrete more bicarbonate, we mean that the kidneys are going to put more bicarbonate into the urine, and that bicarbonate will then be removed from the body when you urinate. When you remove bicarbonate from the body, that brings bicarbonate concentrations in the blood down, and that allows hydrogen ion concentration to increase because there's not bicarbonate there to essentially neutralize the hydrogen ions anymore. So when you bring your hydrogen ion concentrations up, that lowers pH. On the flip side, when the concentration of hydrogen ions in your blood is consistently too high, your kidneys are going to start to secrete or excrete less bicarbonate. If you release less bicarbonate into your urine, that's going to allow bicarbonate concentrations to drift up, and those bicarbonate molecules in the blood are going to react with or bind with hydrogen ions, essentially neutralizing them, and that's going to cause the hydrogen ion concentration in the blood to decrease, or effectively raise blood pH.